What you're looking at here is what is called a registration of a live birth. It's a certificate that indicates that a child was born, and that child is not considered a Canadian citizen, nor is it considered a person. It is simply a child or a human being under law. And this documentation, registration of a live birth, as you see here. Now if I scroll down, I'm going to try and zoom in. It says surname of family or family name, and all given or Christian names. So they make a distinction. They say all given names or all Christian names. So there's two different designations there. All Christian names, or if you're not religious or following the Christian doctrines, then all given names. Now nowhere where it indicates the child, this is me here, if you see, it says kind of birth, single, sex, male. It moves on to say child. Now we keep going. Are the parents married to each other? Yes. Date of birth, it states the date. Now nowhere where it identifies a child does it state that the child is a Canadian citizen. Nowhere. Now you scroll down, and here's the indications of my father. Now when you scroll down on that documentation, you'll see the one who is indicating who was born, or who they're saying is the father and the mother. It doesn't say declarant. Now notice that it gives the father's full name and then states that the father is indeed a Canadian citizen. And same with the mother, Canadian citizen. However, the child, as you saw before on this paperwork, is not considered a Canadian citizen. Now, this is the only documentation that we as human beings, men and women, can get and can possess that is an actual indication of a living being, a human being, or a man or a woman, and not an artificial person. And it's called registration of a live birth. And this is a very old document. It came from microfilm. It's from 10th of May 1975, when this document was originally created. So they register a live birth, that being a human being, a man or woman. The registration of that act gets placed into a record, and they title it Registration of a Live Birth. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that all human beings are born free, and that everyone has a right to life. The international covenants also state that all human beings, we are born free. Now, as you see, this documentation is called a registration of a live birth. And it is an indication of a human being being born free. Born free. And this was the first documentation ever created, or first documentation on me. Me. Now, in this documentation it says my name that I go by, which is John, is considered either my given name or my Christian name. That's what they designated. And I'm not designated anything. In this, it states that I'm a child and that I was born. And that's it. I'm not designated a person, or I'm not designated a Canadian citizen on this documentation. My parents, on this registration of a live birth, are designated and titled Canadian citizens on my live birth record. However, me, I am not. I am just considered a child who has been born, a human being, a man, and at such a time I am free. Now, all they did was registered my live birth, or registered the event of the live birth. This registration of a live birth, I never see it, nor do I receive a copy of this documentation, nor does my parents. It gets filed away with a government minister or a government department. That's where that documentation goes. Until, hopefully, one day, after enough study and research, you understand that you need to get your hand on this documentation because of what it represents. Now, when I get old enough and I start seeking for my own identification and I inquire of the government, I will receive a birth certificate or a copy of an act of birth, neither of which is a copy or has anything to do with the live birth record. This birth certificate and copy of an act of birth is now something that is issued to you. Issued. And the names on these documentations may look familiar as the name that was given to you on your live birth record as your Christian name. However, they are not the same name. These names are issued to you or assigned to you by the government. And as such, it has control. There is control and authority within these names. Meaning that because someone has granted you the right to use these names, someone has issued you these names, someone has assigned these names to you, they have control of the name. You are just a beneficiary to that name. Now, a lot of people are beginning to understand that this is a trust relationship in between us, the individual, and the government bodies. Well, the starting of that trust relationship is in these certificates here. Because at this point, they have issued you the right or assigned you the right to use that name, which belongs to them. Because through the registration of the live birth, they created, if you will, that name to be used in a legal context. That being of the person. The person. So you go and you acquire identification that bears the name that is being drawn from the birth certificate or the act of birth, and that still shows or puts forth the fact that it's an issued name, it's an assigned name, and therefore you are considered a person under authority that can be governed. So the government, they seized upon your freedom and they turned around and they issued or assigned you a name. And the assignee is you, your name. You're considered the assignee. You are the beneficiary of that name. The assignor is the government, and they are the owner and the trustee of that name. They've allowed you beneficial use of that name. They've allowed you. That's why you're considered the beneficiary of that name. Now, a beneficiary has all the rights and entitlements that is included as being a beneficiary, as long as the terms and conditions to the benefits of using that name are followed. And there are plenty terms and conditions that are placed upon this beneficiary relationship that the government has established with you. For example, you, as the beneficiary of that name, must pay for rights and privileges through permits and license or other taxations. house taxes, gas taxes, water taxes, and the like. That's part of the benefits of being a beneficiary to the name. I can write a long list here about all the grievances that we have concerning the way they've twisted the beneficiary position that we should be in, such as, again, paying taxes. When you go to work, having 30% of your salary seized. Then, after that, you go to the grocery store and you buy food, and you must pay taxes on that. And then you go to buy some type of needs for your home, whether bedding or clothing, and again, you must pay taxes on that. And then, if the list can go on and on. Now, those are the, if you will say, the benefits for the government. Even though this name, we should be in the beneficiary position, we should be profiting, it should be actually benefiting us by using this name. They've twisted it around, they've changed principles of law in order that when we take on or assume the role of the beneficiary of the name, that when we put our energy into that name, into that role, it profits the government. It profits them a lot and not us. It actually takes away from us. But there's another side. On the flip side of all this, Canada, the government, who again, it's set up as Her Majesty being the head of this government, the Queen, but Canada has an obligation to respect human rights and fundamental freedoms. It's a liability that's upon them. And that is on an individual level. For you, for me, for our families. But most have no idea or no clue what are their fundamental human rights and freedoms. They only know what are their rights and responsibilities and duties as a person, a Canadian citizen. Because Canada failed to teach them what are human rights and what are fundamental freedoms for a human being. Because in the expression of human rights and fundamental freedoms, it seems that it's non-profitable for Canada. And Canada is based upon a debt-ridden system that is based upon commerce. We all know, or most of us know, that this debt-ridden system is coming down. Already Canadians are suffering debt to about 150% of their finances, as the banks are reporting. And majority of families in Canada have just taken on a whole load of debt, and banks have allowed it to happen because they wanted to keep the economy going, this artificially propped up economy going. And that's going to come to crash. But on an individual level, once you understand about your human rights and fundamental freedoms, that they have been stripped from you by the fact that you have been designated a legal person, and that legal person is being controlled, and that legal person who you think you are is issued to you through a name. And all the time that you go around living your life, you don't understand what's happened to you. It's a form of bondage and slavery. Truly is. Because they force you as a legal person to pursue after a living and to have to make a living, while the few, including the Queen and her family, sit there and collect millions and millions of dollars off of your hard energy and your family's hard energy. And then if you don't study and put the energy into understanding what's going on and what's transpiring, then you're more than likely get upset and say, oh no, my part that is taken from me is to help the systems here in Canada and to support them. That's not true. These systems here, these social systems here in Canada, they don't support our fundamental rights and freedoms. But that wasn't the issue They're not supported through your tax dollars. They're independent of your tax dollars. Without the government ever taking $1 from you, you could have all these social systems that are around you because of the wealth that is in Canada and the wealth that we have here because of our natural resources. We can turn that wealth into supporting our social systems. I would never advocate that because our social systems are not based and founded upon the principles of human rights and fundamental freedoms. When you understand what these are and you compare them to the social systems here in Canada, the social systems here in Canada fall very, very short compared to what we as human beings are entitled to, or what is our fundamental rights and freedoms, and that Canada was under obligation to guarantee for us.